Hello YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. This is some old Elvis guy. It's lovely to have you join me today. Now today's video is a little bit shorter than the last video was. For those of you that have been watching my videos, I've got a series looking at recording sessions of Elvis, and the most recent video was looking at the February 1977 sessions that took place at Graceland. If you haven't seen that video, I'll drop a link in the description. Please watch it, I think you might find it interesting. Keep tuning in though, because there will be a second part to that looking at the October 77 sessions at Graceland, just to round that all off, and that should be coming soon. Today's video, I want to look back at a release from years gone past, and a release that's a little bit more unusual. This is a release from 1981 that was released in the UK. I'm not sure if it was released in the States or not. Let me show you. It's called Elvis, The Ultimate Performance. And this was released on K-Tel Records. Now, I'm not sure if K-Tel Records exist out with the UK. K-Tel Records are a budget line that used to do a lot of compilations, often TV advertised. And this one was no different. This one was TV advertised as well. I've managed to track down the original TV advert for this, the commercial for this. I'll run that commercial now for you. If it's not there, it's because I've got a YouTube strike for copyright.
The experience of an Elvis concert was electric.
What you have done. We had gone together with suspicious minds.
Now, experience the very best of his concert performances on Elvis, the Ultimate Performance.
Now, if we have a little look at the track listing for this, I'll pop it on the screen for you. You can see it looks very like an average Elvis Presley concert, with Can't Help Falling in Love finishing it off, with CC Rider, etc. at the beginning. But what's quite unique about this particular album is that it's not an actual Elvis concert. They're calling it the Ultimate Performance because they are taking recordings from a range of different concerts of Elvis and putting it together to make, if you like, a virtual concert that they would say would be an ultimate performance from Elvis. Which is an interesting concept and quite a novel idea, I suppose. So, where do these tracks come from, though, is quite interesting. They come from 3 already released Elvis live albums. There are some tracks from Elvis in Person at the International, which was on the From Memphis to Vegas, From Vegas to Memphis double album set. There are some tracks from Aloha. And finally, some of the tracks are taken from Madison Square Garden. As I say, an interesting concept for an album. And to be quite honest, it is quite nice to listen to. I find myself, when I listen to it, thinking where these tracks came from originally. But this probably wasn't aimed at the hardcore Elvis fan who had Madison Square Garden, Aloha and In Person at the International already. This was TV advertised and by a label other than RCA. And to be fair, it sold quite well in the UK. K-Tel did some other Elvis albums as well. Another one that they did was Elvis Love Songs. And to be fair, again, it's a reasonable track listing on this. It's got tracks like Anything That's Part of You, Kentucky Rain, Until It's Time for You to Go, Memories, as well as the ones you might expect like Love Letters, Can't Help Falling in Love, Always on My Mind, etc. So, yes, they were kind of mass-produced budget albums, but to be fair, they attracted people to Elvis and increased sales. Now, this was released back in 1981. So if you think about the context of when it was released, that was at a time before FTD, It was a time before we had soundboards, so we didn't have a massive number of Elvis live concerts to listen to. As I say, it was an interesting idea. What's also interesting is if you have a wee look at the back there are quite extensive liner notes, and those liner notes are written by Todd Slaughter. Now, particularly fans in the UK will be very familiar with Todd Slaughter. He has a YouTube channel as well. I'll pop the details of it on the screen. Todd Slaughter was president of the fan club of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth back in the day. And those of you out with the UK, although you might not realise it, you actually do know Todd and have seen Todd, because if you saw the original CBS special, Todd Slaughter is there with the UK contingent of fans who were filmed arriving for the CBS special. I'll run some clips of that on the screen for you to see who Todd Slaughter is.
Thank you. The official Elvis Presley fan club of Great Britain and the Commonwealth is probably the world's largest Elvis Presley fan club. We boast a membership in excess of 12,000 members, and that's a live membership. It's not one that we keep adding members to each year. Once each year we bring a charter flight to the United States, and that's what we're doing here in Cincinnati today.
All the way from Scotland! All the way from Scotland!
We all expected Elvis Presley to be about 12 feet tall, with an aurora around his head and a fanfare, but of course it wasn't like that, and he was everything that everybody says he was. A very natural, quite shy sort of person.
But quite extensive liner notes on there explaining a little bit about it. Let's have a quick look in now. My copy I bought not long after it came out is a bit flappy. I need to get the glue to it, but let's have a little look inside. Now obviously it's not an RCA release, it's on KTEL Records. There we look, see? Lets you see the label. I know some of you like to look at the labels on these. And there we go. So let's have a little bit of a deeper dive into where these tracks come from, what tracks are from where, and how it sounds. It does sound quite like an Elvis concert. There are moments in it where it doesn't flow as well, but it's an interesting concept. So let's have a wee look. I'll pop the track listing up on the screen again for you to see. The 2001 theme, opening theme, is taken from Aloha and into CC Rider, which is also from Aloha. Now I have to say that transition between CC Rider and Blue Suede Shoes, it's quite jarring. It doesn't fit. If you think about it, when you listen to it in person, Blue Suede Shoes fits really well as the opening, with the intro to that being an opening instead of 2001, for example. So it does almost feel as if we're having two openings. So I felt that took me a wee bit out of the experience at that point. We then move on to Johnny Be Good and Are You Lonesome Tonight, which are both, again, from In Person. Now, I'm sure some of you might have opinions as to what tracks you would have chosen from these three concerts if you were making an ultimate concert. Feel free to let me know in the comments. Thinking now, looking back with our eyes now and what we have, it would have been quite nice to have had the laughing Are You Lonesome Tonight. But bear in mind, this was 1981. And the silver box set that premiered the laughing version of Are You Lonesome Tonight had only just come out in 1980, so I suspect RCA would not be in a position where they'd want to license that to a third-party label to release. But it's interesting to look at the tracks that are there and where they came from. So after Are You Lonesome Tonight, we go on to Never Been to Spain, which is taken, as you would imagine, from Madison Square Garden. We then have You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, again from Madison Square Garden, and The Impossible Dream from Madison Square Garden. For the Elvis introductions, we move on back to Aloha. Now, what's interesting here, of course, is in trying to make this virtual or pseudo concert, the introductions aren't going to be exactly correct for all the tracks that appear on this virtual concert. But it's the Aloha introductions, followed by an American trilogy. After that, for In the Ghetto, we move back to In Person for both In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds. So we get the 7-minute 46-second live version of Suspicious Minds, which I suppose if I was going for a version to put on here, it probably would be that, with the energy that it has. It's interesting. I'm having a wee look today at where these tracks come from. But what's interesting, if you have a look at the album cover that came with this, it doesn't actually tell you anywhere on there which concert the tracks come from. I think that might have been more appealing to fans, but I suspect they were trying to make it feel like a new, fresh concert and not indicate too clearly that these tracks came from previous release concerts, I guess. It's interesting, on the TV commercial for the album, they use footage, as you'll have seen, if I didn't get a copyright strike, as you'll have seen from the footage, it's using footage from Aloha and talking about it being this ultimate performance. They're not explaining which albums it came from, which is unfortunate because, in a sense, if people had come to Elvis new through this album, it would have been nice for there to have been adverts on the back for Aloha, for In Person, for Madison Square Garden, to try and get people to listen to those full concerts. So maybe a missed opportunity, but again, not an RCA release. So KTEL will be unlikely to be advertising RCA releases. Going back to the track listing. So after the 7-minute 46-second version of Suspicious Minds from In Person, we move again back to Aloha for Love Me and Burning Love. After that, we move back to In Person for Words, and then this virtual concert, ultimate performance, closes out by going back to Madison Square Garden for Polk Salad Annie, I Can't Stop Loving You, and then closing with Can't Help Falling in Love, all from Madison Square Garden. So that's us gone through this rather unusual release. So what are your thoughts on this? I'd love to hear in the comments if this was released out with the UK. Was it released under a different name, under a different label that wasn't KTEL? Is this a new concept to you? Let me know in the comments if you bought this back in the day the same as I did and what you think of it. I gave it a listen again just the other day and it's very listenable. Obviously, I know that it's not an actual concert, but it flows reasonably well. The one part, as I say, that I felt jarred a little was between CC Rider from Aloha and Blue Suede Shoes from In Person. Other than that, it flows reasonably well. They've spliced it at just the right point where the applause is or where the silence is so that it kind of flows together. What are your thoughts on the idea of doing this? Do you think it's okay to do it? Do you have an issue with it? I think, to be honest, it was probably quite good at drawing new fans to Elvis. The fact that it was TV advertised as well helped in that regard. So if it brings new fans to Elvis, I don't have an issue with it. It's not one I listen to particularly often. I listened to it again ahead of doing this video, but I've not listened to it much in the last 20 or 30 years. But again, a nice cover. It's interesting, when I look at that cover, I do think to myself, couldn't Aloha have had a cover like that? I don't know about you, I'm just not the greatest fan of the original Aloha cover. I think it could have been so much better. If you look at the FTD release of Aloha, that's a really nice cover. And I like the artwork on this. So that would have been quite a nice one for Aloha, I think. So let me know in the comments what you think. What tracks would you put into your ultimate Elvis live concert? If you could, that's a good one. I'll put the track listing back up for this. What would your ultimate performances be? Would you want some more from Elvis's later period? To be honest, if I was doing that album, I would have to have My Way from the CBS special. I would want Unchained Melody in there, again from CBS. There's other ones that I liked from the late 70s that I might like in there, and I Love You So. But again, you've got to appreciate at this time, as is so often the case, they weren't releasing a whole lot of stuff post Aloha. Or certainly late 70s. 76 and 77 didn't feature much. So, and that maybe says more about EPE than anything else. So let me know what you think. As I say, a shorter video today, but I just wanted to share that with you because it's an unusual release. And I'm not sure how widely people will have that release. Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would click a like. It really is a like for Elvis, as my friend Steve always says on his show. But if you can, it really helps because it helps YouTube's algorithms to realise that this video might be worth recommending to other people. I would love it so much if you could subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything. If you click that bell and turn it black, you'll be notified when I put new content up. I am getting so close to 500 subscribers. It would be absolutely amazing if I could get to 500 subscribers. Well, that's me for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been Some Old Elvis Guy, Duncan. Till next time.